"Can I eat your leftovers, homeless?" Girl asked the millionaire his response. "Leave everyone in tears. Welcome to Dusk Tales. Let's uncover what really happened." The city, a sprawling canvas of ambition and indifference, often cast its longest shadows over those who dwelled beneath its glittering surface. Among them was Alara, a girl no older than 13, whose existence was a testament to quiet survival. Her clothes, a patchwork of donated garments, bore the indelible scent of damp concrete and forgotten dreams. Her hair, perpetually tangled, framed a face etched with a wisdom far beyond her years. Her eyes, the color of twilight, holding a stillness that belied the turbulence of her daily life. Alara moved through the bustling streets like a phantom, her presence acknowledged by none, her hunger a constant, gnawing companion. She was one of the countless overlooked, a silent observer of a world that raced past her, oblivious to the quiet strength that simmered within her slender frame. Her days were a methodical dance with desperation. She knew the rhythm of the city's refuse, the symphony of its discarded moments. Today, however, a new rhythm called to her, one emanating from the polished brass doors of the Celeste, a restaurant synonymous with exclusivity and extravagance. The tantalizing aroma of roasted duck and truffle oil, a phantom caress against her starved senses, pulled her closer. Through the panoramic windows, she could see the opulent interior, the hushed murmur of conversation, the glint of crystal, and the figures of patrons, silhouetted against the warm glow. Among them, a man sat alone at a table by the window. Mr. Alistair Thorne, a titan of industry, a man whose name echoed in financial districts, was known for his sharp mind and even sharper suits. He was dining, as he often did, with an air of detached contemplation, his plate still laden with untouched portions of exquisite food. Alara watched him, not with envy, but with a peculiar, almost academic interest. She noted the slight furrow in his brow, the way his fingers drummed a silent rhythm on the linen tablecloth. Subtle tells that suggested a mind preoccupied, perhaps even burdened, despite the outward trappings of success. The thought, audacious and almost reckless, formed in her mind with a clarity that surprised even herself. It was not a plea for charity, not a conventional begging. It was a simple, pragmatic question, born of dire need and an uncommon dignity. The cold wind bit at her exposed skin, but a different kind of chill, that of nervous anticipation, now settled deep in her bones. She took a deep, shaky breath, pushed open the heavy brass door, and stepped into a world that had, until this moment, existed only as a distant, unattainable dream. The contrast between the frigid street and the immediate warmth of the restaurant was startling, a physical manifestation of the chasm that separated her life from the lives within these walls. Every eye in the room, it seemed, turned towards her, not with malice, but with a collective, almost imperceptible shift of discomfort, as if her mere presence had fractured the polished illusion of their insulated world. Alara, accustomed to being invisible, felt the weight of their gazes, but she held herself tall, her gaze fixed solely on the man by the window, the one whose untouched plate held the promise of sustenance, and perhaps, something more. Her quiet determination was a force in itself, a testament to the unyielding spirit of someone who had learned to navigate the world on its harshest terms. The silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable, punctuated only by the clinking of silverware and the soft murmur of distant conversations that now seemed to cease. She knew this moment was a precipice, a decision point not just for her, but for the man she was about to address. The lingering scent of fine food, once a torment, now offered a strange, compelling invitation. She walked towards him, her footsteps barely audible on the plush carpet, her worn sneakers a stark contrast to the gleaming marble floor. Each step was a quiet assertion of her right to exist, to ask, to be seen. Alistair Thorne, lost in the intricate labyrinth of a multi-million-dollar deal, was vaguely aware of a shift in the restaurant's hushed ambiance. He looked up, his gaze, accustomed to dissecting spreadsheets and corporate structures, landing on the small figure standing beside his table. A girl, young, perhaps 13, her clothes threadbare, her face smudged with city grime. His first thought was annoyance, a ripple of irritation at the disruption to his meticulously ordered evening. Waiters, trained to anticipate his every need, hovered uncertainly in the background, their expressions a mix of embarrassment and apprehension. Before they could intervene, Alara spoke, her voice surprisingly clear, devoid of the whine or theatricality he had come to associate with street beggars. "Sir," she began, her tone quiet, almost conversational. "I noticed you haven't touched much of your dinner. Could I possibly have your leftovers?" The question hung in the air, a stark, uncomfortable anomaly in the refined atmosphere. It wasn't a plea for money, not a sob story, but a direct, unadorned request for something already deemed worthless. Thorne paused, his fork, still holding a perfect piece of rare steak, halfway to his mouth. He looked at her, truly looked, and for the first time, he registered something beyond her appearance. The steady gaze of her twilight eyes, the quiet dignity in her posture, the complete lack of shame in her simple query. She wasn't begging, she was asking for a practical solution to a pressing need, framing it in a way that preserved her self-respect. A senior waiter, Mr. Harrison, his face a mask of polite distress, approached. "Miss, I'm afraid we can't have you." Thorne raised a hand, cutting him off. His gaze remained fixed on Alara. He saw the faint tremor in her hands, a solitary tell of her inner struggle, but her eyes held firm, unwavering. He hadn't encountered such directness in years, not from anyone, let alone a child on the street. It was a jarring contrast to the polished pleasantries and veiled demands he faced daily. An odd fascination began to override his initial irritation. This girl, with nothing but a question, had managed to pierce through his carefully constructed bubble of detachment. The silence stretched, the weight of every patron's curious gaze pressing down, but Alara remained still, unflinching. She wasn't just asking for food, she was challenging a societal boundary, quietly, implicitly, in the most public of ways. Thorne slowly lowered his fork to his plate, the steak forgotten. "My leftovers," he repeated, not in disbelief but in contemplation, letting the words echo between them. He considered the sheer audacity, the raw honesty of the request. It was an unusual, almost uncomfortable moment of genuine human connection in a world often defined by transactions. He found himself intrigued, a sensation that was rare and frankly unsettling. Alistair Thorne's response came as a shock to everyone, most of all to Mr. Harrison, the senior waiter who stood poised to usher the unexpected visitor out. "No," Thorne said, his voice measured, his gaze still fixed on Alara. A flicker of disappointment crossed her face, quickly masked. Then he continued, "You cannot have my leftovers, but you may have a fresh meal." He gestured to the empty chair opposite him. "Sit. Order whatever you wish." The words, though simple, landed with the force of an unexpected thunderclap in the hushed dining room. Alara blinked, her composure momentarily faltering. "A meal," she whispered, as if the concept itself was foreign, too grand to grasp. Her eyes darted around the opulent room, then back to Thorne's face, searching for a trick, a hidden catch. But there was none, only a quiet resolve in his expression. Harrison stammered, "Mr. Thorne, sir, with all due respect, we have a policy." Thorne merely raised an eyebrow, a silent, imperious command that brooked no argument. Harrison, defeated, bowed slightly and retreated, though his anxious glances continued to dart back. Alara, after a moment's hesitation, moved to the chair. She settled into its plush velvet with a quiet grace, her small frame seeming almost swallowed by its grandeur. She didn't fidget or gawk. Instead, her eyes, intensely observant, took in the details of the table. The pristine linen, the gleaming silverware, the single perfect rose in a crystal vase. A menu was brought, its leather binding and extensive offerings daunting. Alara, unaccustomed to such choices, simply pointed to the dish Thorne had been eating. "I'll have what he had," she said, her voice still quiet, but with a newfound, almost imperceptible tremor of anticipation. As her meal was prepared, a strange silence settled between them. Thorne, usually comfortable in command of any conversation, found himself at a loss. He watched her, trying to decipher the enigma she presented. She didn't appear overwhelmed, merely observant. When her plate arrived, a perfectly seared piece of fish with delicate vegetables, Alara looked at it with a reverence that spoke volumes. She ate slowly, deliberately, savoring each mouthful, not with the ravenous haste he might have expected from someone clearly starving, but with a quiet, almost meditative appreciation. There was a delicate precision in the way she handled her fork, a refinement that was at odds with her rough exterior. It was as if she understood the artistry of the food, even as she devoured it. "It's remarkable," she murmured, between bites, her gaze meeting his for a fleeting moment. "I haven't tasted anything like it." Thorne, sensing an opening, finally spoke. "What's your name?" "Alara," she replied, without hesitation. "And you, Alara, what do you do?" He expected to hear about begging, or scavenging, or the harsh realities of street life. Instead, she offered a different kind of answer, one that began to unravel the mystery of her quiet intensity. "I watch," she said. Simply, "I watch how people move, how their eyes flicker when they lie, how their shoulders slump when they carry burdens they don't speak of. I watch the city breathe, the patterns of its traffic, the way light changes on the buildings. There's a lot to see, if you just stop and look." Her words were delivered without affectation, just a quiet statement of fact. Thorne found himself utterly disarmed. He was a man who prided himself on observation, on reading people. Yet this young girl, with no formal training, articulated a depth of insight that echoed his own professional instincts. He had asked a simple question, expecting a simple answer, but Alara had offered him a window into a world he rarely considered, a world of acute, unfiltered perception. The meal continued in a comfortable silence, punctuated by the occasional shared glance. Thorne felt a curious shift within himself, a loosening of the rigid boundaries that usually defined his interactions. He had seen the poverty, yes, but more profoundly, he was seeing the person, a young girl with an unexpected and profound understanding of the world, hidden beneath layers of societal neglect. It was a humbling realization, and it sparked a nascent curiosity that he hadn't felt in years, a curiosity that transcended the realm of business and venture capital. As Alara finished her meal, a comfortable satiety replacing the gnawing emptiness, Alistair Thorne continued to observe her. He had expected a litany of woes, perhaps a thinly veiled attempt to extract more from him, but Alara simply sat, her gaze drifting around the opulent room, still absorbing its details with an almost scientific detachment. "You truly observe, don't you?" Thorne mused, leaning back in his chair. "More than most people who walk these streets, even those who claim to see everything." Alara nodded slowly. "Survival teaches you to, but it's also interesting. The way people try so hard to hide what's truly going on inside, yet their bodies always tell the truth." She gestured subtly towards a couple at a nearby table. "That woman, for example. She keeps adjusting her necklace, a nervous habit. Her smile is fixed too wide. And the man, her husband, keeps glancing at his watch, not subtly enough. They're celebrating something, but they're both distracted, worried." Thorne followed her gaze. Indeed, the couple, ostensibly enjoying an anniversary dinner, radiated an underlying tension he hadn't noticed. "What worries them?" he pressed, genuinely intrigued. Alara shrugged. "Could be anything. Money, a difficult conversation they're putting off, perhaps even just the pressure of pretending to be perfectly happy when they're not." Her insight was startlingly astute, echoing his own, often cynical, understanding of human facade. He realized she wasn't just a keen observer. She possessed a nascent empathy, an ability to read the subtle emotional currents that flowed beneath the surface of everyday interactions. This wasn't merely intelligence. It was a profound, intuitive wisdom. He thought of his own world, a world of high-stakes negotiations and veiled intentions, where such a skill was invaluable. He considered his own life, a meticulously constructed edifice of success and strategic alliances, and felt a pang of something akin to emptiness. He had built an empire, yet he rarely truly saw the people around him beyond their utility. Alara, with nothing, saw everything. "How old are you, Alara?" he asked, softening his tone. 13, she replied, her voice steady. "And you live on the streets?" She nodded, her eyes briefly losing their steady composure, a flicker of vulnerability showing through. "Since I was 8, my mother, she was sick, and then she was gone. The system didn't have a place for me." Her words were stark, devoid of self-pity, just a statement of fact. Thorne felt a complex swirl of emotions. Pity, yes, but also a growing admiration for her resilience, her remarkable ability to retain her humanity, and her sharp intellect amidst such adversity. This wasn't just a child asking for food. This was a hidden gem, polished by the rough abrasive of life, shining with an unexpected brilliance. His initial cynical wall began to crumble, brick by brick. He had always believed in meritocracy, in the idea that hard work and intellect would inevitably lead to success. But Alara's story was a harsh rebuttal to that belief, a stark reminder that talent, no matter how profound, could be utterly buried by circumstance. He found himself questioning his own comfortable assumptions, his comfortable distance from the lives of others. The weight of his own untouched wealth, his opulent surroundings, suddenly felt heavier, almost shameful. It was more than just pity. It was a nascent sense of responsibility, a stirring within his carefully guarded heart. He had stumbled upon something extraordinary, something that deserved more than just a meal. It deserved a chance, a platform, an opportunity to truly flourish. The thought of letting her simply walk back into the night, back into the shadows, felt unconscionable. The challenge was not just to help her, but to understand how to help someone like Alara, someone whose life was so utterly different from his own. He realized this encounter had shifted something fundamental within him, a quiet earthquake beneath the foundations of his well-ordered world. The quiet understanding that settled over Alistair Thorne deepened into a profound sense of responsibility. He felt a rare, almost uncomfortable stir of purpose beyond the acquisition of wealth. This wasn't just about charity, it was about recognizing a remarkable human being and the sheer injustice of her circumstances. He needed to understand the true extent of her capabilities, to prove to himself that his instincts were correct, and that his intervention would not be a fleeting act of misplaced sentimentality. "Alara," he began, his voice thoughtful, "I oversee a vast network of businesses. Sometimes, even with the best minds, we miss things, nuances, hidden patterns." He paused, his gaze fixed on her. "I have a particular problem right now. A complex financial report, hundreds of pages, filled with data points. My analysts have been poring over it, but there's a disconnect, a single critical error we can't pinpoint. It's delaying a major acquisition." He paused again, observing her reaction. Alara listened intently, her brow slightly furrowed, her eyes betraying no immediate understanding of the corporate jargon, yet she absorbed his words with an almost palpable intensity. "I need someone with an extraordinary eye for detail, an intuitive understanding of underlying logic, to review it. Someone who sees what others miss." Thorne leaned forward, lowering his voice slightly. "It's a test, Alara, not of your education, but of your innate ability. If you can find this discrepancy, no matter how small or hidden, I'll know your observations are more than just casual insights." He hesitated, then continued, "And if you succeed, I'll offer you more than just a meal. I'll offer you a path, a future that is not defined by the streets." Alara's eyes widened fractionally. The gravity of his words was clear, even if the specifics of the financial report were not. This wasn't an act of pity, it was a challenge, an opportunity to prove her worth on her own terms. The thought of such a task, so far removed from her daily struggles, was daunting, yet a spark of excitement flickered within her. I don't know anything about finance, sir," she admitted, her quiet honesty unwavering. "But I understand patterns, and I know how things connect, even when they seem separate." Thorne smiled, a genuine unforced smile that softened the hard lines of his face. "That's precisely what I need, patterns, connections." He called Mr. Harrison over, who still hovered nervously nearby. "Harrison, cancel my remaining appointments for the evening. We need a quiet room, some coffee, and a copy of the Phoenix Group merger prospectus. Hard copy, please, and a fresh pen and notepad for Alara." No interruptions. Harrison, dumbfounded but obedient, scurried off. The news of Thorne's extraordinary guest and his even more extraordinary request began to ripple through the restaurant. Patrons exchanged whispers, their initial discomfort giving way to curiosity, then disbelief, then a strange, quiet anticipation. Who was this girl? And what was Mr. Thorne thinking? In a private, quiet study within the restaurant, normally reserved for high-stakes business discussions, Alara sat across from Thorne, a thick, imposing binder laid open before her. The pages were dense with figures, charts, and complex legal prose. She felt a momentary wave of apprehension, the sheer volume of information threatening to overwhelm her. But then, she remembered his words, patterns, connections. She took a deep breath, picked up the pen, and began to read, slowly at first, then with increasing focus. Thorne watched her, his expression unreadable. He saw her eyes, darting across the pages, occasionally pausing, then moving on. He noted how she sometimes tapped her pen lightly against a line of text, or hummed a faint, almost inaudible tune, a quiet ritual of concentration. Hours passed. The restaurant emptied. The city outside grew quiet, but the small study remained illuminated, a beacon of improbable discovery. Alara, oblivious to the passage of time, was utterly immersed, her mind, unburdened by preconceptions or conventional analytical methods, searching for the subtle discord, the single note that was out of place in the grand symphony of numbers. Thorne felt a growing sense of wonder, an almost childlike fascination. He wasn't just observing a girl, he was witnessing an extraordinary mind at work, a mind that operated on a different plane, unconstrained by the rigid frameworks he had always known. The test wasn't just for Alara, it was for him, a test of his own capacity to believe in the unseen, the overlooked, the quietly profound. He had set a trap, and now he waited to see if her unique vision could disarm it. Hours bled into the late night, the silence of the cellist broken only by the rustle of pages and the soft scratching of Alara's pen. Alistair Thorne, initially filled with a detached curiosity, found himself captivated, watching Alara with an intensity he usually reserved for high-stakes board meetings. She was utterly absorbed, her small brow furrowed in concentration, her fingers occasionally tracing a line of numbers. He saw her pause at a seemingly innocuous footnote on page 47, then flip back to an appendix on page 32, then forward to a projection chart on page 210. Her movements were not haphazard. They possessed a quiet, deliberate logic, a dance between seemingly disconnected data points. Just as the first hints of dawn began to paint the sky outside the window a faint gray, Alara sighed, a small quiet exhalation that seemed to release the immense concentration she had held. She pushed the binder away, her face tired but alight with a quiet triumph. "It's here, sir," she said, her voice a little hoarse from disuse. She pointed to a tiny, almost invisible asterisk on page 147, indicating a cross-reference to a set of assumptions tucked away in a supplementary document. The projection on page 210, the one for Q3 growth, relies on an interest rate assumption from a previous quarter. But the current market forecast, buried in this footnote here, she tapped the asterisk, shows a projected increase in that rate. If you apply the new rate, the Q3 growth is significantly overstated by precisely one. Thorne stared at the page, then at the footnote, then back at Alara. His own analysts, a team of highly paid, experienced professionals, had missed it. They had focused on the obvious data streams, overlooking the subtle interplay between an assumed interest rate and a future projection, especially when one was relegated to a tiny, easily dismissed asterisk. Alara had seen the phantom thread connecting two seemingly disparate points, the tiny, almost invisible flaw that could derail a multi-million-dollar deal. A 1.8% discrepancy, Thorne murmured, his voice laced with disbelief and a dawning awe. That changes everything. It means we'd be overpaying by tens of millions. He looked at Alara, truly seeing her not as a child, not as an outcast, but as an extraordinary intellect. The test, he realized, wasn't just about her finding the error. It was about him, acknowledging that true brilliance could emerge from the most unexpected places, untainted by formal training or societal validation. The irony was not lost on him. The leftovers he had almost dismissed held more value than the entire meticulously prepared meal he had consumed. This girl, existing on the fringes, possessed a keenness of mind that surpassed his most seasoned expert. A profound humility settled over him, mingling with a surge of something akin to exhilaration. This was more than just solving a business problem. It was a revelation, a profound affirmation of human potential that defied all his preconceived notions. He saw the quiet determination in her eyes, the sheer relief and satisfaction of a task accomplished, and felt an overwhelming wave of emotion wash over him. It was a sense of profound vindication for her, and a deep, quiet wonder for himself. The initial cynicism he held about the world, the belief that success was only for the privileged, began to crack, allowing a surge of genuine hope to flood in. The silence in the room was no longer just a backdrop. It was filled with the silent roar of an old world, giving way to a new understanding. This moment, illuminated by the nascent light of dawn, was not merely a breakthrough for a business deal, but a fundamental shift in the landscape of Alistair Thorne's soul. The following days were a blur of activity, orchestrated by Alistair Thorne with a quiet determination. He did not simply offer Alara charity. He offered her a bridge to a different life, one built on the foundation of her extraordinary capabilities. He arranged for a small, comfortable apartment, a place she could truly call her own, filled with books and art supplies she had only ever dreamed of. He enrolled her in a private tutor, not for conventional schooling but to nurture her unique observational and analytical skills, providing her with the tools to articulate the insights she intuitively grasped. The news of Thorne's unconventional protégé, the former homeless girl who had saved his company millions, began to ripple through his social and business circles. The reactions were, predictably, mixed. The skeptic, antagonistic force in his world, embodied by his old money peers and some of his more conservative board members, scoffed. A street urchin, Alistair? Surely this is some kind of midlife crisis, a fleeting philanthropic folly. His longtime business rival, Marcus Reed, a man whose ambition was matched only by his thinly veiled contempt for anything unconventional, publicly questioned Thorne's judgment, subtly suggesting he was losing his touch. Investing in sentimentality, Alistair, that's not how empires are built. These voices, accustomed to the rigid hierarchies of power and privilege, saw only the absurdity, unable to perceive the inherent value in someone who didn't fit their narrow definition of worth. They represented the societal prejudice, the ingrained disbelief that profound talent could reside in such an overlooked vessel. Yet, there were others, the beneficiary or witness collective, whose reactions were far more nuanced and ultimately more impactful. Miss Harrison, the senior waiter from the Celeste, who had initially been mortified by Alara's presence, watched her transformation with a quiet awe. He saw the subtle changes in her posture, the newfound confidence in her eyes, and became a silent advocate for Thorne's actions, sharing the story with hushed reverence among the restaurant staff. The tutor Thorne hired, a retired professor of mathematics, named Anya Sharma, initially approached the task with professional detachment, but within weeks, she was enthralled. Alara devoured complex concepts with an astonishing speed, not just memorizing formulas but intuitively grasping their underlying principles, applying them in ways Dr. Sharma had never seen before. She doesn't just learn, Dr. Sharma confided to Thorne, her voice brimming with excitement. She understands at a fundamental level. It's like teaching a prodigy who skipped all the textbooks and just sees the universe's design. Alara, for her part, navigated her new world with the same quiet observation and humility that had first struck Thorne. She was grateful, deeply so, but never complacent. She absorbed everything, her mind a sponge, her spirit vibrant with newfound purpose. She wasn't just learning, she was reclaiming parts of herself that had been dormant, buried beneath the weight of survival. She spent hours not just studying, but exploring, her innate curiosity unleashed. She would often present Thorne with unexpected observations, a subtle flaw in the city's traffic flow, that if addressed, could save millions in fuel, or a simple, empathetic solution to an employee morale problem he hadn't even recognized. Her insights were unvarnished, direct, and often startlingly effective. Thorne found his own life transforming. His focus shifted from mere accumulation to meaningful impact. He began to host small, intimate gatherings, where Alara, still quiet but increasingly confident, would share her observations on complex problems, her unique perspective, often unlocking solutions that had eluded even his sharpest mind. He saw the ripple effect firsthand. His employees, initially skeptical, became intrigued, then inspired by Alara's story and her undeniable talent. She challenged their preconceptions, forcing them to look beyond the surface, to see potential where they had only seen despair. This journey was not just Alara's, it was also Thorne's, a profound recalibration of his own values, a quiet testament to the transformative power of a single act of radical empathy. The whispers of skepticism still lingered, but they were beginning to be drowned out by a growing chorus of quiet admiration. The true test, the moment that would silence the remaining skeptics and solidify Alara's extraordinary position, arrived 6 months later. Alistair Thorne's conglomerate, Thorne Global, was facing a hostile takeover attempt, orchestrated by none other than Marcus Reed. Reed had painstakingly constructed a case, highlighting a perceived weakness in Thorne Global's supply chain, a complex, international network that seemed impenetrable even to Thorne's internal expert. The decisive moment was a highly publicized, televised corporate debate, a final showdown between Thorne and Reed, where each would present their arguments to an independent arbitration committee and the world. Reed, smug and confident, laid out his meticulous analysis, pointing to seemingly unresolvable bottlenecks in Thorne Global's operations. Mr. Thorne's empire, Reed sneered, is a magnificent but fragile edifice, built on an inefficient global skeleton. It's time for a stronger hand. Thorne, calm but serious, then introduced Alara. She walked onto the stage, a slender figure in a simple, elegant dress, her quiet presence a stark contrast to Reed's bluster. A ripple of murmurs went through the audience. Reed scoffed openly. "Is this a new public relations stunt, Thorne? A child?" Alara ignored him. In a voice that had gained quiet strength but retained its humble clarity, she began to speak. "Mr. Reed's analysis is brilliant in its way," she acknowledged, disarming the room. "He has identified all the points of friction, but what he has failed to see are the invisible connections, the human element within the machine." She projected a complex, simplified diagram of the supply chain onto the large screen, a visual she had created herself. At first glance, it appears that supplier C in Shenzhen, due to its remote location and reliance on a single port, is the bottleneck. She pointed to a red dot on the screen, but upon closer observation, it's not the port, it's the local customs office, and specifically, the lead customs officer, who consistently takes extended breaks on Thursdays. She clicked, and a small, almost humorous graph appeared, showing a dip in customs processing on Thursday. This isn't malicious, merely a cultural difference in work-life balance that creates a cumulative delay. My proposed solution is not to reroute the entire supply chain, which would cost billions and take years, but to simply adjust the shipping schedule for supplier C by half a day, ensuring their Thursday shipments arrive Friday morning when the officer is fully engaged, and perhaps providing the customs office with a new, faster document scanner, a goodwill gesture. The room was silent. Reed's jaw hung slightly open. The simplicity and profound effectiveness of her solution, born of acute human observation rather than complex data algorithms, was staggering. She didn't just identify the problem, she identified its human root and offered a remarkably elegant, inexpensive solution. Then, with a quiet confidence, Alara shifted to Reed's own proposed acquisition plan. And as for Reed's alternative, acquiring Meridian Logistics, she continued, his projections assume a 90. However, a quick cross-reference of their internal reports from the last 6 months, easily found in their publicly filed environmental impact statements, reveals consistent delays due to an aging vehicle fleet and recent union disputes. Their true on-time rate is closer. His projections are based on flawed assumptions, which, if left uncorrected, would lead to substantial losses post-acquisition. She clicked again, displaying the evidence. The committee members leaned forward, their faces a mixture of astonishment and dawning realization. Marcus Reed, his face pale, tried to interject but his words caught in his throat. He had been so focused on his grand strategy, he had missed the tiny human details, the hidden patterns in plain sight, that Alara, with her unique perspective, honed by years of unnoticed observation, had effortlessly uncovered. Thorne looked at Alara, his eyes glistening, not with sadness, but with overwhelming pride, a profound sense of awe, and a quiet, deeply personal joy. He saw the tears in the eyes of Dr. Sharma, who sat in the audience, and the murmurs of astonishment from the media. The silence in the room was now heavy with the weight of absolute vindication. It wasn't just a business triumph, it was a human triumph, a testament to the power of overlooked talent, of profound empathy, and of seeing true worth beyond superficial appearance. The tears were not of sorrow, but of a quiet, overwhelming realization of beauty and truth. In the aftermath of the arbitration, the committee's decision was unanimous. Thorne Global's supply chain was robust, its future secure. Marcus Reed's hostile takeover attempt collapsed, his reputation irrevocably damaged by Alara's quiet dismantling of his flawed analysis. The story of the young homeless girl, who saved a corporate empire, spread like wildfire, capturing the imagination of the public and forcing a collective reevaluation of what talent truly meant. Alara's life, once defined by invisibility, was irrevocably transformed. She continued her studies with Dr. Sharma, but her path broadened far beyond corporate analysis. Her unique ability to see patterns in human connections found its calling in social enterprises. She worked with urban planners, advocating for designs that fostered genuine community rather than isolation, and advised nonprofits on optimizing their outreach, not just with data, but with a nuanced understanding of the human stories behind the numbers. She championed initiatives that sought out and nurtured hidden potential in other marginalized individuals, establishing a foundation that provided resources and mentorship for those, like her, who had been overlooked by society. Her quiet wisdom, once a tool for survival, became a force for widespread positive change.
Alistair Thorne, too, was profoundly changed. His once detached demeanor softened, replaced by a warmth and engagement that surprised even himself. He began to dedicate a significant portion of his wealth and influence to social causes, particularly those focused on education and opportunity for disadvantaged youth. His corporate strategies became infused with Alara's lessons. He sought out diverse perspectives, invested in ethical supply chains, and fostered a culture of empathy within Thorne Global. He often mused that while he had once chased financial success with relentless ambition, the true wealth he had accumulated was in the profound human connection he had forged with Alara, and the clarity of vision she had bestowed upon him. The Celeste restaurant, once a symbol of exclusivity, found itself unexpectedly transformed. Its staff, led by a now beaming Mr. Harrison, spoke with pride of the day Alara walked through their door. The story became a quiet legend, a reminder that human dignity and unexpected grace could appear in the most surprising forms. Patrons, previously oblivious, now looked at the world outside the restaurant's panoramic windows with a newfound subtle awareness, perhaps wondering what hidden stories lay behind the faces they passed on the street. The ripple effect of one girl's quiet courage and one man's unexpected empathy spread far beyond their immediate world. It touched the lives of countless individuals who were given opportunities they never imagined, inspired those who had lost hope, and challenged the rigid preconceptions of a society often too quick to judge and dismiss. It demonstrated, in the most profound way, that the greatest resources often lie not in the tangible assets we measure, but in the immeasurable depths of human spirit and the unseen connections that bind us all. And perhaps that is the deepest lesson of all, that true wealth is found not in what we possess, but in the potential we recognize in others, and the compassion we choose to extend. For sometimes, all it takes is one simple question, asked with an uncommon dignity, to unlock a universe of possibility and reveal the inherent, undeniable worth that resides in every soul, patiently waiting to be seen.